Welcome to the Startup Grind.
William actually was born in, we'll talk about that in a minute. So anyways, William basically spent some time overseas, over in the Czech Republic, in Prague. He's working with DHL. Went to the University of Kansas for his undergrad. I was over there for several years, came back, went to CU Boulder. Woo!
Go Bucks!
Go Bucks! Woo! I think I only won a game, but great. So I went there, got his MBA, and then after that kind of started up at Uber. How many people here don't know who Uber is? Anyone? Oh, come on. Really? Okay, you will.
I love it. Uber is a great service.
So all of us have heard a lot about Uber. So it's been interesting to watch them over the years, and they've been doing an absolutely amazing job. So we have a tradition here at Startup Grind. So when I introduce William, you all have to stand up and scream as loud as you can. So that's the tradition. And if you don't, you won't get any more beer. So that's it. So I'd like to introduce William McCollum from Uber. So I'm going to talk really loud. Can you all hear me?
Yeah!
Right. Kids say I talk too loud.
I talk really softly, so you can't.
So he gets to use the mic, but I don't. So I'm going to shut this off here. All right, cool. Thank you very much. Thank you for showing up today.
And thank you for the very kind introduction. I
And
appreciate it.
thanks, guys. He asked me if he could bring his beer up here, and I'm like, are you kidding me? Absolutely. So, well, there you go. So, how I like to start these out typically is really asking you kind of know a little bit more about yourself, right? So where did you start? Where did you born? That kind of stuff. Bring us up to the time that you went over to Prague.
Okay, so can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I've got a little bit of a voice that projects as well. Is that cool?
That's cool.
All right, cool.
Good.
So let's go ahead and do that. So yeah, I'm from Kansas. I'm a Jayhawk. I'm a Kansan by birth and a Jayhawk by the grace of God. And I studied math and English there, which was a lot of fun. But as a lot of my brethren from Kansas, I wanted to do something a little bit different. So I moved to Prague, Czech Republic after undergrad, where I found a job with DHL at a global data center. And so it would appear that logistics and technology are my passions, which didn't necessarily, no one grows up and says, hey, I want to be an astronaut. Hey, I want to work in tech and logistics. It doesn't necessarily work that way, but it's been an extraordinary fit, it would appear. So there I was, and I was selling a lot of, hosting services back when we were calling things blade servers. I don't know if anyone's familiar with those? So those were great back in the day, and then they were like, hey, there are these things called virtualized servers, and I was like, oh, that sounds great for the customer. And then the customer said, yeah, that does sound great, oh my gosh. And then there are these guys from accounting and finance that said, yeah, we'd love to sell those things, but the depreciation schedule on what they currently have just hasn't gotten to a point where the business case makes a lot of financial sense. And I said, wow, that sounds awesome. I want to understand what that means. And so off to business school I went, and I found myself back here in Colorado, where I've been for about 4 years now. So I did my MBA at CU Boulder, which was...
So why did you go to CU?
Well, I came to CU, yeah. So CU has a great reputation for entrepreneurship, has a great reputation for green energy, and so there I was at CU Boulder.
So I'm only asking this
yeah, no
because
worries.
I need to tell the folks that I know at CU that I'm trying to help promote it. So just FYI.
Now, CU had a great package for me, and it was a great fit from the get-go. Applied to a lot of schools, and CU Boulder was the one. And I wanted to get into green energy, and I wanted to get into entrepreneurship, and the job search process, let's say, it works its ways, and sometimes it's frustrating, and sometimes it's revealing, and slowly but surely what I found was, here I am, I wanted to get into green energy, and then I was interning at Encana Oil and Gas, and that's another growing industry, but it just wasn't a great fit. They move at a different pace, and I had this energy that I wanted to get going. and the oil and gas industry, that, you're talking about extraordinary startup capital for projects even, and extraordinary time periods for regulatory hurdles, and we can definitely talk a lot about that. But ultimately, what ended up happening is, as I was applying to all these companies, I said, well, my goodness, what's wrong with this industry? And then it kind of dawned on me, well, what's wrong with me? I'm the common denominator here. There's one common denominator here, and it certainly doesn't seem to be the industry. It certainly seems to be me. And then there was this job description for this company called Uber. And I was reading through the job description, and I was like, man, I can do that. I know I can do that. And then I wrote this cover letter. I was like, well, just be yourself and let them know that you can do that. And so forget about all this corporate stuff. You've got this startup energy. You've got this experience. You've got this degree. Time's a wasting. Let's get going. And so I wrote this cover letter that said, time's a wasting. Let's get going. And then in 5 minutes, I heard the Skype ring, and it was beep, boop, beep, and it was literally Uber. And so Austin Geit was on the phone. She was the second or third employee at Uber, and she was like, hey, let's do an interview. And I said, yes, let's do an interview right now. And so the interview process took 3 weeks, and it was extraordinary. It was challenging. It was invigorating, and it was intense. And so there I was in San Francisco, and I gave my launch plan to Travis and to Ryan Graves and Travis Kalanick, our CEO and COO, Travis, CEO. And anyway, just not to confuse the two. I was nervous as all heck could be, but I remember, a little ways through, the ice broke, and we were talking about the Mile High Club and how Denver's going to join. And I remember the interview was going really well at that point, and it was a really good time to kind of jam on what do we want Uber to be in Denver, and how can we take this central concept and localize it, and that felt really good. And so that's how I ended up with Uber, and so hopefully that's kind of a good
it's good.
history.
I think part of what you said, from a standpoint of going to a company that's existing, and I know that the question was asked, you have startups, you have companies that are existing. And, here's I think a good example of, here's a company that's been around. You're here to start a market. You're here to start the Denver market, and it's really a startup. I mean, you're taking some existing stuff, right, that's already around, and you're trying to apply it to market. And we all know, those of us that have been involved or getting involved, that no matter where you are in that process, those things change, right? And some of those things are exactly the same, the types of things that you approach and don't. So I think part of what you said is kind of falls along those lines, right? You took the bull by the horns, right? You made an effort. You decided to go into an industry that probably wasn't what you decided to do originally, right? I mean, going from clean energy to, not that Uber isn't, but I mean, to Uber, right? You started an area here in the market.
A lot of the things that attracted me to clean energy were, the idea of urbanism, the idea of making a positive contribution, and at the same time making money. Private enterprise can achieve a lot of these social goals and at the same time be successful. And I think that is something that Uber definitely embodies. We're a company that is making an environmental impact. We're having a social impact vis-a-vis job creation, vis-a-vis reducing drunk driving. And at the same time, we're this technology company that is a company of people that moves people.
Right.
So I think that's really cool. But just kind of going back to your point, we were startup at that time. While I wasn't out there bootstrapping with my own personal credit card, we were building upon that foundation of other folks that had, and we were taking this startup concept and we were localizing startups, and there was no promise that this Denver thing was going to work out, and that's where it became startup. And startup to me isn't necessarily, hey, we're the first people or you're the founder or the CEO, but what you are, startup is this feeling that you have and this energy, this fire that you have, and that's something that you can't fake. You have to have that energy. You have to have that love. That we call it Uber love, and we call it fierceness as well. And you've got to have that if you're going to survive at this company. And it doesn't matter if you're employee 1,500 or if you're employee 50. If you don't have that Uber love, you're not going to survive at this company. And so I think that still applies today.
So with that, kind of leads into the next thing. I think part of that's
folks who talk about passion, right? So folks that start something or whatever, whether it's even their own job or it's a new startup or whatever, it's the passion, right? It's that emotional aspect of taking what you have here, right, and making it happen, right? So with that said, having that passion within your organization and the market that you're responsible for, it really kind of comes down to some element of culture, right? So how do you, in your market, right, what you're responsible for, how do you help design, if you will, create that culture within the group that you have here in the Denver market? What are some of the things that you do?
Yeah, I mean, someone could be an applicant, they could be, an Einstein for sure, but if they don't have that startup passion, that startup desire, then you're not going to be a cultural fit. And it's a team effort. What we want to do is complement each other's skills. And so, it goes back to, I always think of, man, why won't this industry hire me? I'm so qualified, I'm so amazing. And then I took a step back and I was like, wow, you're such a jerk. You're the issue. It's not the industry. And I kind of approach everything at Uber like that. It's a team effort. And globally, it's the same product, but it's the team that brings that same product to every localized market. So that way the client doesn't know the difference between Rio Uber and Paris Uber and Denver Uber. Okay. And it's that common thread, and that common thread relates back to that startup thread, where everyone takes ownership over their own individual part of the company. And when you empower ownership on the Uber side, and then you empower ownership on the driver side too. Because what we're doing is, if you think about it, we're scaling entrepreneurship.
Right, exactly.
I think that's why you have so much pride and so much Uber love from our side, and why the drivers, they have so much pride and Uber love from the driver's side, is because they own their own part of this collaboration, this real partnership.
Right.
And then the consumer is the one who ends up benefiting.
Right.
I think that's really cool.
No, I think that is very unique. And I think you kind of got into the question I was going to ask, but it's really about multiple startups, right? I mean, Uber
right.
is a conglomerate, if you will, of startups, right? You have many, many, many people that want to own part of their livelihood, right? They want to be in charge of their own destiny, if you will. And you guys are providing a platform, more or less, to help them do that, right?
Yeah, I think so, and hopefully that's a value add to the rider experience and to the driver experience is the way that I like to think about it, is if we don't empower entrepreneurs to build their own business, then we don't have a business. And so, we're the tech startup, and anymore, I'll be the first to admit, it's really hard to say that we're a startup these days, because, we're not. But when we were here at Galvanize, we were, and what we were doing and what we still are and doing and how we relate to startup is we're empowering these folks. And when they scrape together the money to buy their first car, or if they own 10 or 20 limousines by now for the Uber Black product, or if they're, a stay-at-home mom with the UberX product, or if they're, transitioning from renting a taxi to owning their own vehicle. All of these are different forms of startup, and when we can relate at that startup level, it doesn't matter if you work for Uber or if you are driving your own company. And I think that that's where the energy comes from and the Uber love comes from, and why it's working and why it's going to continue to work.
So what do you think I'm going to come back to UberX in a minute.
Please.
When it comes to that person that wants to be involved in the Uber love, right? What do you do? What does your group do to evaluate, assess, if you will, whether they kind of have that or not? I mean, similar to
for sure. Right? No, it's my team right now. I have no doubt that they're still over at the office. They're not here to watch me talk about their jobs because they're busy doing their jobs. And that's the Uber love. That's the fire. That's the startup passion. Is let's not talk about these things. Let's go do these things, and that's the thing that's so incredible, is that people are so motivated and they're so passionate about what they want to do, is they want to talk about it all the time, and they want to live the brand, and they want to earn being with the brand because it's a part of who they are. Mm-hmm. And so it's not to say, hey, this is my job. It's to say, this is a part of who I am. And I think that having that kind of that kind of mentality, that paradigm, when you approach your everyday work, it makes the work-life rhythm, not work-life balance, but work-life rhythm, because it is rhythm. It makes that tenable. When what you do and your passion is a part of who you are, then it makes it tenable. Because otherwise, you're clocking in and you're clocking out.
Right.
And it doesn't work.
So what is that rhythm for you?
I do a lot of Uber.
Do a lot of
Yeah, you know, like I don't drive. You know, I Uber to and from, and you know, it's definitely a passion and it's a way of life, for sure.
So,
but it has to be.
Absolutely.
That's startup.
That's it's got to be a way of life. Exactly. So going back to UberX, maybe you can explain to the folks what that was. It was a kind of an interesting hurdle, I think.
For sure.
For Uber and its growth and its development. Talk a little bit about what that is and kind of how you guys are dealing with all that.
Yeah. So UberX is our innovation, our business model innovation, and that's fancy talk for saying it's a way to empower people to not only own their own vehicle, but to make money providing safe and reliable rides through the Uber app, right? So UberX launched about a year ago, almost to the day, here in Denver. And what it is it's this new thing. Some people call it ride sharing. We call it UberX. It empowers normal folks to use their existing assets, their cars, to make money. If it's a part-time gig, it's the same thing as if it's a full-time gig. You can build a business upon this, you can supplement your income, and you can provide a service to the riding public that's safe, that's reliable, that's vetted. And so that's what UberX was in its genesis, and that's what it's become still, but much, much bigger.
Right. So some of the hurdles that you did here in Denver that you personally were responsible for to get over there and talk about some of the legislative issues.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Yeah.
People that get involved in trying to solve a problem, at least from my experience, you run into these hurdles. Some of these hurdles you know about, and some come out of the blue, right? That are challenges, right?
Yeah, for sure. So from the very get-go, if you say, oh well, hey, anybody can drive, that doesn't jive. That doesn't work. What we're doing, if you think about it, is we're providing an opportunity to a driver, but then as well, peace of mind to riders and to the general public is so extraordinarily essential. And so, Colorado, we were the leaders when it came to the regulatory front in terms of passing the first ride sharing, the first UberX bill, which we're super pumped about. But a lot of the practices that were in that bill were practices that were introduced from the very beginning. Background checks, safe drivers, vehicle inspections, safe cars, insurance, peace of mind. These are so crucial, these are so essential, but these are market forces at work. If we don't have a safe and reliable product that the public trusts, that drivers can invest in, then we don't have a business. And so it took the regulatory side a little bit of time to catch up on that front. But from a business side, people depend on these rides and drivers depend on these opportunities. So we had to live up to our commitment. And whatever's going on out there, if it's going to end up on the front page of the Wall Street Journal, we have to make sure that we're up to snuff, that we're doing the right thing because it was inherently the right thing and it was the right business choice. Not because it was mandated by a regulator, not because it was mandated by a legislature, but because it was the right thing for the consumer and the right thing for the driver. And I think that that's fundamentally why Uber's continued to grow the way that it does here in Colorado, but worldwide. We wouldn't be in 260 cities, and Denver wouldn't be the market that it was if, we were selling magic beans or something like that.
You don't sell magic beans?
We don't sell magic beans. we don't. So anyway, maybe that's my long-winded way of saying, the legislation was definitely earned here, but that's because we were doing the right thing in the first place, and that made it a very strong case to sell not only to the public but to responsible legislators.
So, being involved in that directly yourself, right? And coming into this organization, it's been what, 2 years?
Yeah, 2.5 years now.
2.5 years.
Yeah.
Okay. So give me a sense of the first day. You come to Uber, you're there, you're excited, your probably hair is on fire, you're just like ready to explode, right?
Yeah, ready to rock. Okay.
I'm just going to ask you, did it meet from an expectation perspective for you? First day.
First day on the job.
First day you walked in and went, wow, this is exactly what I was looking for. Or it was like, what the hell did I get myself into?
It was
Or was it somewhere in between?
it was July 2nd, 2012.
Okay.
And we didn't have anywhere to walk into because we didn't have an office. And so the first direction was, hey, go and find an office. And I was like, well, what do we need with an office? What do you guys have in mind? And they're like, well, we're kind of figuring this out as we go, and your market could be different. So it kind of depends on what's available, and it kind of depends on what you guys think. And so we ended up above Pinche Tacos and Okinawa Sushi over on Colfax, New York. And it was July and August, and it was a very hot summer, if you guys remember. So I remember the smell, because it was Mexican and sushi, and we weren't air conditioned there. But the rent was right, and we were close to where the limousine companies were. And they're all in Aurora, but we wanted to be close to the Denver core, because that's where the business is and that's where the supply is. So from an operations standpoint, it made perfect sense. It was the confluence, and hey, we've got eats downstairs, right? So, those were very humble beginnings. You're right.
Okay.
And
Yeah, I like that.
and we were close to the limousine companies. And then we ended up in Galvanize, which is this facility here, and we moved in October 2012, and I remember signing the lease over there with Lawrence Mendez and Jim Dieters, Chris Onen, and Tony Mugavero, Rehan Hassan, all the founders of this place. Just extraordinary people with this vision to take this old place. Gather wasn't here. I mean, there wasn't a sign that said paint's dry or paint is wet because there wasn't any paint, So anyway, very humble and startup beginnings here because we had to grow from the ground up.
So what motivated you to keep coming back? I mean, sometimes people get a challenge like that and may not have had that experience before, and they're like, what do I do? How do I get to the next stage? Right? What were some of those obstacles that you sat back and were like, did you go to anybody, for example? Did you reach out? What did you do?
For sure. So Uber's an extraordinary organization, and so Austin Geit, she launched, coincidentally, the position called a launcher. And what launchers are people who help accelerate the startup experience. And so what they do is they bring the Uber love, they bring the Uber knowledge, they bring the Uber practices, and they help localize, but as well speed up the team that's going to be there. And so every city team has a GM, a community manager, and now a marketing manager, and then an operations manager. And what they do is they help bring you up to speed and accelerate and incubate your market as quickly as possible in order to go to the next market, and then let you take this thing that you've created and accelerate that. And so we had an extraordinary launcher who now manages the San Diego market. Great friend, Chris Ballard is his name, and then Megan Zobak, who still works with the launch team. She's had North American launch, so she was here, and this was her first launch. And so we were really fortunate to have a full team, a full Denver team here now, and Scott Carey on operations and Maggie Brennan on marketing. They're still with the company, obviously here in Denver, leading the way. So we had some very smarter people in a lot of other ways than certainly I am, with a lot of energy and a lot of Uber love, who love to hear the words no because it inspires them and motivates them. And
explain that for a minute.
You get 1 out of 10 limousine company owner who says, I think this might have a shot. And now 2 years later, those folks who said no are saying, what the heck was I thinking?
Yeah.
And when you're working with one limousine company and then all of a sudden they've got 2 cars and 3 cars and 6 drivers and 7 drivers, and real jobs and real incomes are being created and real entrepreneurship is being realized, that makes all the no's worth it. And so that's Uber love. That's really cool.
So in your experience over the last 2.5 years, top lessons learned, personally, first.
Yeah.
Not corporate, I'm talking personally for you. What do you think the top ones are that you were like?
Yeah, for sure.
Either one, didn't expect, learned, did something, had some sort of a sense of whatever.
I'd say that one of the biggest lessons that I've learned is, what motivates people. And it turns out pride motivates people a lot. And when you unlock someone's sense of entrepreneurship, we interact with an extraordinary range, just this eclectic range of people from every walk of life, from every range of life. But they all have this common thread that when you unlock this common sense of pride in a job well done, you can't take that away from them. And that's very rewarding not only to them but to yourself, and you can really feed off of that positive energy, and that's a virtuous circle. And so you talked earlier about culture, like what motivates us. If you can unlock someone's sense of pride and you see that smile on their face when they're growing their own business because you've helped them to do so, you've given them the tool set to do so, it's awesome. It's
So
great.
with that, before we get to the next
Yeah, for sure.
lesson, how do you perpetuate that between all these people that are out there that have their own business? I mean, what do you guys do? I know in my own mind what you guys do, but for the folks here, what do you guys do to help build and basically solidify, if you will, right, that community of drivers, right, to keep that Uber love going?
Yeah, solidify is one word for sure, because you want to solidify that sense of pride within one driver, but you want to grow that sense of pride overall. You want to grow the pie. From that standpoint, you know, the more that you focus on who it is that are the most important key players, if it doesn't involve improving a driver's opportunity set, and if it doesn't improve the quality of the ride, and if it doesn't involve providing regulatory certainty in order for investment to be made and peace of mind to be achieved, then probably from a startup standpoint, it's not a crucial decision to be made. Focus on the clients, focus on the drivers, focus on what you're doing is right. And if your decision doesn't involve one of those key three things, then more than likely that's something that can be triaged out. And when you laser focus like that, then you can really achieve some pretty incredible things.
Cool. So how do you laser focus?
That's it. That's it. You know, you keep the blinders on, and every day, you know, we want to scale efficiency in order to increase the number of drivers out on the road, because ultimately that benefits the riders out there, and we can expand geographically, and we can really do some incredible things in terms of determining how cities and even countries at this point can really move, and that's motivating. That's really cool.
Cool. So other lessons learned?
Perseverance is definitely one.
So how do you personally do that? How do you keep yourself taking that next step?
You got to dig deep sometimes, because, you know, with some of our regulatory challenges, this thing wasn't a sure thing by any stretch of the imagination. And what we're doing is the right thing for the riders, it's the right thing for the drivers, and it's the right thing for economies, but it's not necessarily the best thing for incumbent interests. And so divorcing yourself from this idea that what we're doing is right, what we're doing is amazing for drivers, they can make more money, and they can deliver a better quality product, and they can own their own assets, and riders can have better reliability, better accessibility, lower prices, and economies grow. But then we have these hurdles from folks who are used to doing things a certain way, and then we've got these hurdles from folks who have run a business in a certain way for years and years. And I'll give you an example. In the city and county of Denver, there's this thing called the Herdic license, which is named after John Herdic, who developed the first horse carriage that was painted yellow, and it was the first manifestation of a ride for hire, a taxi. And the reason we needed a Herdic license in Denver is because there was only one thoroughfare from Union Station to the Brown Palace. And to this very day, the Herdic license exists. And these are the hurdles that we're dealing with. The last time the Herdic license provisions ordinance was updated was 1955.
Nice.
And the world's changed a little bit since 1955. And yet the taxi industry is very interested in keeping the Herdic license around because it behooves them. And so, you know, that's just one example of the hurdles that we face. Sure. Is that in the best interest of the drivers? No. Is that in the best interest of the riders? No. Is it in the best interest of the states and the city's economy? No. But is it in the best interest of incumbent players? who've benefited for a long time from a lack of competition positively.
Absolutely.
And so that's frustrating, but on the other hand, it's motivating because we're doing the right thing for the right people.
Okay, that's a good statement. I think that, myself, talking with folks that are, and even things I've been involved in, we've come out of those rows, right? You have these, and you don't know this, man. You're going into this whole thing and you're like, you have no idea these things exist, right? You try to use as much research as possible, whatever. And all of a sudden something comes out of the woodwork like that. I mean, I know personally when I started my first one, we had a law that's been around since the 1800s. Hello, who knew about that? So we had to deal with that kind of thing. So in your own mind, knowing that, from a competition perspective, right, or changing the way that people perceive you personally, you Uber as brand, you driver within Uber, how do you, I'm finding, I keep coming back to this because you have people that are working for Uber that really are their own business. And they're using Uber brand, right? And it's like more like a franchise perspective, right? Really. So keeping that to where there's a level of consistency, right? You said it earlier. We got to make sure the ride in Rio de Janeiro is the same as the ride in Atlanta is the same as the ride, right? So people that travel or whatever want to have that same experience. And having that method of communication with these folks. How do you do that here in Denver with the folks that you're doing? I think that's kind of interesting because if you have a business and you're trying to expand it, you want to make sure there's some level of consistency.
For sure,
right?
For sure.
Repeatability, right?
So there's two things that are at work there. So first and foremost, drivers are not employees of Uber. They are independent contractors, and we call them software licensees because that's exactly what is happening. They utilize the software platform, the driver app. Mm-hmm. But as well, what we're doing is we're empowering them as independent contractors to take control of their own companies, their own destinies, and take pride in their own work. And that's how you do it, is you work with folks who want to deliver that level of service. And as the business grows and grows and grows, if you deliver a higher quality level of service and you really dig in and you're really established as a driver and you take pride in it, then good things are going to happen to your endeavor. And so that's on the first side of it there. So I think that's the most important point to come back to, is how do we deliver that service. And then the second thing is from the client side, it's a standardized app. It's the same app on the client side. And so if you're in Riyadh, if you're in Hong Kong, if you're in Tokyo, if you're in South Africa, Perth, we just launched Perth today. It's the same app around the world, localized currency, but for the most part, you know what you're getting yourself into because the app is transparent, it's in your language, it's localized to you, the client. And so when you meet those two together, you've got these local startups who are making this thing happen, and then you've got this global product, so you can deliver that same level quality, that same expectation. And I think that's an extraordinarily powerful combination, and that's why we continue to grow as we do.
Cool. So, you personally.
Okay.
William sitting around, goes home, hangs out. What are the things that you, as they do for yourself to kind of keep a level of, I call it balance, lack of a better phrase. What are some of the things that you do to help? Number one. Number two, I have an issue. Who do you reach out to outside if there's people that you have that helped you get to this point?
For sure.
Right? Who are some of those people, and what are some of the things that they help you? People call them mentors.
Yeah, for sure. So, fitness is super important. So we all live in Colorado. So soccer, skiing, hiking, running. Those are great stress reliefs, for sure. And then just in terms of peer mentorship at Uber, you've got a lot of very young folks who are taking on extraordinary responsibility and these extraordinary challenges. And so a lot of the more mature markets that launched at about the same time, the Boston, Seattle, San Diego, Dallas, Atlanta, and some of the even the bigger markets, Chicago, for example, a lot of those GMs are going through a lot of the same challenges. Because even though we're the same startup, there are so many salient qualities and so many similar challenges, and so that's been a great pleasure. And then just meeting a lot of folks here at Galvanize and through industry, there is a lot of room for mentorship. And so, hey, maybe I should sit on that email, and maybe I should just hold back on that one conversation. And I've typically been pretty glad I did.
So you've been involved here in some of the other stuff. I know some folks have asked me, and I get asked this question a lot, hey, what other organizations or meetups or whatever, or is there ones that you went to during that period of time that you were involved in that you found were valuable? Because folks are like, I need help with this, I want a mentor, I need a co-founder, I need a developer, whatever it is. I mean,
right. So
you've been in the mix of things.
Yeah.
And this is a good place to come. I mean, obviously.
This is a great place to come. When I was going to grad school in Boulder, Silicon Flatirons was great. And I had some amazing mentors, Brent Bernthal and Jason Mendelson from Foundry, Brad Bernthal with the CU faculty at the law school. Christopher Leach with the e-finance program. I mean, just fantastic mentors and fantastic figures. And, if they say, hey, this is probably an event worth going to, then I'd say, all right, well, then I'll be there.
Probably go. Yep.
But at the end of the day, I was very glad. A lot of folks talk about entrepreneurship, and then I studied finance. I wasn't good at it necessarily, but I knew I needed to be good at it. If you want to be an entrepreneur, finance is key. Cash flow is king. And if you don't have a viable product that doesn't generate cash from the get-go, then I wish you all the best. And that's something positively that we learned from the get-go. Right. And so, ultimately you're running a business and you have to be very aggressive about it. You have to have a product that people can believe in that's worthwhile.
Right. Solving a problem.
That's solving a problem. And when you have a problem that you're solving that you can be really passionate about and cash flow is a part of it, good things are going to happen. And I think that with Uber, we've got an amazing product where opportunity is there for partners, and we're building a business alongside theirs. So when you align incentives and you're solving such an extraordinary problem that people didn't know existed, that's a really amazing foundation to move forward. And so you got to know your product, you got to understand the underpinnings of how to build a business, and cash flow those are the underpinnings. And then legal and regulatory, and knowing the difference between what's legal and then what's right. And so if you're doing something that's legal and what's right for your customers and right for the people that you work with, good things are going to happen. And I think that those are the main ways to approach. If you want to start a business, if it doesn't involve those four things, then that event probably isn't worth the while.
Cool. Well, I want to open it up for a couple questions. So those of you who got some questions for Will, let me know. Yes.
So I heard a venture capitalist talking about how the Denver Boulder area has been inhibited by the perception of more of a work-life balance, and so you don't have the grinders, if you will, going from sunrise, well into the burning of midnight oil. So you seem like you might be in a unique position to compare and contrast the Denver Boulder area to other regions, maybe around the country. Valley, New York, Chicago, etc. Have you seen that at all?
Yeah, it's interesting. So I've got 10 FTEs in my office, and all 10 of us are transplants. All 10 of us are college educated or master's educated, and we grind, and it's a tough week. So work-life balance is a myth. It's work-life rhythm, and at some points in your life, you have to put a lot more into work. And we know that December and Halloween are upon us, and we need more cars on the road. And then as well, you have to know when your life needs more of that rhythm, because relationships and human beings are super important. And so it's not a matter of being able to balance, because that implies that it's a 50-50 ratio, but it's on a daily basis assessing where you need to triage your time and energy, because those are your limited resources. So, if your wife's sick at home, that's not hard. If you got to pick up the kiddos, then it's time to go and pick up the kiddos. But if it's time to get drivers on the road and make sure that they're ready to rock and roll for New Year's Eve, that's not hard either. And so that's why we call it a rhythm. And that, when you start to approach it from that paradigm, I think that kind of marries the idea between a Chicago or East Coast work approach and then a Colorado/California, hey, whatever. And that's how you keep. Hopefully you keep your sanity. Because otherwise, it's kind of a myth, and I think you're just chasing after something that's going to frustrate you. And so that's, I think, how we achieve that, hopefully in my office. I don't know, we've got a cultural survey going around, so I'll find out what my team really thinks.
That'll be interesting.
So anyway, it's a great question.
We'll do the back one first. Yes, sir.
Sure, thanks. Thanks for giving it a whirl.
Yeah, for sure.
My first Uber experience was as an Equinox member in New York through promotion where the Tesla Model S, if you ordered an Uber ride.
That is an extraordinary first ride. Okay, yes.
Tesla.
Essentially a Tesla Model S ride, and it was free for 4 days.
Really?
Equinox members.
That's awesome.
Wow.
I thought it nailed it. It just spot on the mindset of like the discerning New Yorker. So what have you learned maybe about the attributes of like the Colorado and like the local Denver?
Would that be a Jeep in Colorado, or would that be?
Subaru, actually, yeah, Subarus.
Okay.
You know,
I was wondering what that would be.
what we find are there are definitely idiosyncrasies to every market, and man, let me tell you, yeah, the Tesla is so turbo popular in LA, and if you can get someone in a Tesla, they're hooked for life, right? But at the partner economics level, I mean, it's just not tenable from a business standpoint, right? And so what do people really, really value? They value reliability. They value GPS. Do you know where you're going? And it really is important. Reliability.
In a taxi, and the guy goes, "How do I
Man.
get there?" I'm like, "Are you kidding me?"
And it's just like, gee whiz, you know, I thought I was paying for a ride here, not getting out my own phone and giving directions. And so, you know, that reliability, do you know where you're going? And then overall the quality of the ride. Those are such salient qualities. And so it doesn't matter if you're Chinese, Brazilian, American, or, you know, from wherever. Those are the qualities that keep people coming back. And I feel like that's where we continue to put our energy. And as long as we continue to stay focused on what it is as our core product, which is facilitating that reliable ride where the driver is competent, and not only that, but clean and safe, man, that's one heck of a combo right there.
Cool. Before I get to you, yes, sir.
Yeah, what kind of CapEx requirements are you looking at to open a Denver metro-sized market?
It depends, and so as the number of markets that we've opened, it's evolved, but every decision that we make involves some kind of an ROI. And so I'm going to come back to the first point that I kind of made is every market in and of itself is a startup, and there's no guarantee that it's going to happen. But on the other hand, we've got a product that is just incredibly, it's just incredibly appealing, right? Not only to riders but to drivers, and it's cash flow centric. And so it's not only a product that fits a need, but it starts generating cash flow upon the first ride by definition. And if you start to look at it from an ROI perspective, and you've got the ability to raise capital, you have to look at it from that ROI perspective and assess what's investment and what's in waste, and make sure that the decisions that you're making are associated with investing in the product that people want, that they'll pay for, and that someone is enticed, someone is interested in providing. And as long as you approach it from that standpoint, it doesn't matter if it's $100 or $100 million. It's all about the ROI at that point.
Do you go down as you open new markets just because of the marketing?
You know, that's a tricky question. And so the brand continues to grow in certain areas, but on the other hand, it's still very, very startup. When we open a new market in, let's say, India, you're talking about a country of 1.3 billion people, and 50, 60 different languages. I mean, that is very much startup. That brand recognition is not necessarily there. But on the other hand, if you go to a new market, let's say, St. Louis, is the supply necessarily there? Do the local drivers believe in that product? They've heard of it, sure, but do they believe in it? And so that's where the boots on the ground still is there, and that's where the ROI has to be. There's no substitute in cash, I promise you, no matter how much money you raise, for sweat equity and knowing your product and understanding that cash flow is essential and that you need a return on the effort and the money that you invest. So that's my way of answering that question.
Right here first. Yes.
Okay. I'm curious how the process has gone for you guys in terms of all that you put into the training, the requirements on the driver's side, and how that sort of looked from, you say that they're independent contractors. Has there been any issue around that with the IRS in terms of, are they really independent contractors, are they employees, and based on those requirements that you have?
The independent contractor.
Yeah, because it's a big deal for a lot of
1099
companies.
versus.
For sure. You know, so drivers are 1099s, and we're very upfront with the way that the structure is. You know how drivers are able to succeed, but as well, in being independent, you're independent to realize your own destiny. What we do is we empower people. We don't have schedules. We don't have these restrictions. You can work when you want to, and you're awarded based upon your efforts. It's as American as it can possibly get.
Sure,
And that's why it works.
But the level of training and requirements
Right.
around certain things, like, have there been, I'm really curious, have there been questions? I have a business model that's similar in a very different market, but, you know, we've got that, and I'm just curious what kinds of hurdles you've had to overcome in that space.
Right. So, you know, first and foremost, it's got to be legal. First and foremost, it's got to be what's right for the driver and what's right for the consumer. And so, you know, background checks for UberX when it wasn't mandated, vehicle inspections when it wasn't mandated, and then as well, you know, the medical checks. That's something that was a part of the new UberX legislation, but that's something that we've embraced locally.
Sure.
And so, you know, that's on the safety side. And then so from the business management side, we've recently introduced, you know, the vehicle financing program, wherein we have a third party that's able to provide access to capital for folks with bad credit and even folks with no credit, because let's face it, there's a lot of folks who are wanting to start businesses but haven't been given the opportunity nor the wherewithal to build credit. Or, you know, people make mistakes and they need to rebuild that credit. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to facilitate opportunity. And so that's an area where we can really improve. How do we leverage our status as a big company to deliver cost savings and perks, let's say, to drivers? You know, we want the drivers to have the best experience they can with driving with the Uber app, because ultimately the consumer wins, and when they win, we all win. And so maybe that's a long-winded way of answering your question, but
you've had no issues with regulatory around employer versus contractor issues based on all that you have required of your drivers? That's kind of fundamentally what I'm asking.
well, yeah, we're pretty straight up with the deal. And so, you know, the terms and conditions are straight up. You know, you're 1099, and this is the way forward. You know, I'll let my legal department answer those questions.
Yeah.
But for the most part, what we do is we provide a transparent and a clear path towards progress for drivers, because we couldn't survive and we couldn't grow
Right?
if it wasn't working.
Right. Thanks.
Yes.
I'm just going to ask, what do you see as the future of Uber? How big do you think we can get? I mean, is it API critical?
Each of Uber,
Yeah.
how big?
Yeah.
How, you know, it's more people, right?
For sure. And so, you know, I'll go into specifics, but what I will say is that we're a collaborative company. And if you really start to think about it, at our genesis, we're a company that helps people move people. And when you talk about API, when you talk about partnership, United Airlines, for example, utilizing the API platform, when you talk about Uber for Business, utilizing the Concur platform for expense accounts, when you start talking about, you know, the deal that we did with the NFL Players Association, when you start talking about collaboration, we're a collaborative company inherently, with us being the technological bridge between folks. And at the end of the day, that's a pretty strong case to be made that we're just getting started.
Cool. One more question. Yes.
You worked abroad for several years. In which ways do you think that benefited you? Does that contribute to your daily successes now? And
Yeah, for sure.
People do the same.
Yeah, working abroad was crucial. So I was in Prague, Czech Republic for nearly 5 years. And then I've studied in England and Switzerland and Costa Rica and China now. And it relates back to the main point that I think one of the biggest lessons I learned abroad is what motivates people. And so to the Czech people, you know, having a beer with your friends and family at 5 o'clock really motivates them. Americans, we're motivated by pride, we're motivated by title, by a job well done, by money. In Japan, folks are, they take a ton of pride in what they do. Pride is the most important thing. In Europe, time off is very valued, but as well, a job well done. And so just kind of looking at what motivates people and how can you get the best out of people knowing what motivates them. And so when we interact with drivers, what motivates drivers? Is it surge pricing on Friday night? Or is it, free oil changes for their vehicle? Or is it, a better tech back end, a better tech interface to help manage their business? Or is it all of the above? What helps motivate people to do the best job that they can possibly do? And everyone's different. And when you can start to identify common threads or an all of the above approach to help improve people's life, when you can understand that better and not look at yourself and focus on them, then ultimately you and your company benefit from it.
Awesome. Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, guys. These are great questions.
Appreciate you showing up to Startup Grind and being part of our family now.
Whew. All right. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, I appreciate it.
Take care.
Cheers.
All right.
Thanks, guys.
So, you're going to be around for a while?
For
We'll
sure.
be around until 9 o'clock. Again, next month we'll have Ron Paulson from PlayLink, so tell your friends, show up. We'll be around here for a little while, so if you have any other questions for William, he's going to be here. And appreciate y'all showing up. Thanks so much. Sign up for our newsletter.
Startup Grind.